Hi, and welcome to another episode of Creating a Life You Love, where we talk about all things mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, and just how to create a healthy lifestyle centered on the Lord. And if you've been following along here, you know that I recently just got married, and this is my husband for the first time on the podcast ever. And today we kind of just wanted to, oh, his name is Christopher, by the way. I forgot to say that. So Christopher and I, we just wanted to talk about the past 2 years of our life and our relationship. We, went through a breakup, we went through different challenges, and then we just got married 3 months ago. And, there's so many like questions that I've received about breakups and red flags in relationships and how to know if they're the one and all of these different things. And so I thought that we would kind of just share our story and also get like your perspective since you haven't been on here. So without further ado, I guess we can just start at the beginning where we first met and just kind of go into how we started a relationship, um, and how that initial phase went. So going back to 2023 in January, if you want to take it from here.
Am I supposed to look at you when I talk?
No, you can you can look at the camera, but you can go back and forth if you want. But I look at the camera because then if you look here, then continue. Okay.
I think that it's helpful to paint a picture as to where I was before I came down to Florida. Just because it was like a very clean break. When I moved to Florida, I didn't know anyone. And so with that, I had developed a bunch of really bad habits as far as the things that I was striving after. And a lot of that really centered around accumulating wealth, and just honestly being attracted to superficial qualities in a lot of the girls that I was dating previously. And I had never developed, I guess, a level of desire for deep character because of the ways that our culture views and portrays what a relationship should look like. That tends to be very superficial and rooted in looks and what other people think of you and a lot of different things. And so I brought that with me to Florida. I hadn't developed much of a relationship with God at that point. It was present in my home growing up, but it wasn't rooted in my life. I think before moving out to Florida, in my mind, I thought that I was coming out to Florida, again, chasing the same things. It was job related, and I wanted to pursue essentially a fast track in this career. I had been working in the finance industry, and I wanted to be on a fast track to get me into a more high profile position. And I took a job that was supposed to be a stepping stone. But as I look back over the last 4 years, I see how God has slowly been changing my desires, and sort of just chipping away at my character and a lot of the ideologies that I had. And so with that came a lot of baggage that I was bringing into relationships and what a relationship should look like.
Yeah. And so fast forward, you moved down to Florida, clean break. Obviously, the first thing you kind of want to look for if you're new in your faith, you're like, oh, a church. That seems like a good place to start. And so you were living in an area that was nowhere near, where I was going to church and where I was kind of living. I mean, it was, out of the opposite direction, maybe 40 minutes. And so what was really cool was someone came into his store that's now his best friend and invited you to the church that I actually ended up going, but we didn't end up meeting there. If you listen to past episodes, then you probably know that. But if you want to kind of go into like how we kind of connected at the gym and how God kind of like used that.
Yeah, so I had been in Florida for about 2 years. And like I said, it was sort of a clean break where it was a fresh start for me when I moved down here. I didn't know anyone, so there was a sense of finding a community, finding people to hang out with and just do life with. And I think there's been such an emphasis on finding relationship, and I think that that's a normal thing. And so with that, I the Lord had started to work on my heart and a lot of my desires. I was deepening my faith in the first 1 to 2 years that I was down here, but was really just applying the same principles. Um,
Of, like, the world.
of the
Kind of
world.
still had that, like, mindset because those habits, like, don't just go away in a second, that you've, like, conditioned for so long, all these negative feelings and, like, things that you've seen, they just kinda stay with you until you, like, dig deeper, so yeah. Which when we met, like, we were both Christians and, like I said, we went to church. Um, and we kind of met over, this desire of like growing and improving yourself. And, that's how we connected in the gym. Actually, you almost hit me with a barbell first and then, you know, which I didn't even realize 'cause I didn't see him. I was just, minding my own business, walking by, and apparently that's the first time he saw me. But yeah, and then something in you, I guess it was like the faith over fear shirt that I had, and you figured like, "Oh, this girl must be a Christian. I'm gonna go up and talk to her." I was a Christian, but we both had so much to learn, which we'll get into. But anyway,
For that 1 to 2 years, it was a slow process of I was still
when
I
you were alone.
when I was
Okay,
alone.
okay, yeah.
I found myself gravitating towards dating apps. It's not fun being alone. It's not fun being yeah, I guess isolated. And this is coming, like, I'm an only child, she's an only child, so we've been able to bond over this in a lot of ways. But I
Yeah.
think that it's innate, and since the beginning, God said it's not good for man to be alone. So there's this
Mhm.
longing for deep relationships and community, and I think that it's very, very difficult and increasingly more difficult in our age, in that um, technology has enabled us to be connected with more people than ever before,
Yeah.
but that's lowered the bar and what that looks like to be an actual deep relationship. So, I mean, even looking at dating apps as my desires of who I was seeking on these dating apps and the reasons why I was on these dating apps, as those were changing and becoming godlier, at the same time, like, I was still being conditioned implicitly to judge people based on a profile that
Their
that,
looks.
that they presented, and even perhaps more wholesome or well-rounded dating apps like a Hinge or something like that, where you're at least able to talk a little bit about your interests. Um, you're still training your brain to look at hundreds of different profiles at a time and pick and choose the things that you like and don't like, as though like people are just like options on a menu type of thing. And so you're training your brain to look at people that way. And so as you get into a relationship, like months into it, after sort of the honeymoon stage, you've romanticized about all these things in this person. Then you see that they're actually a human being that has baggage and flaws. And with that, in your mind, subconsciously, you're filtering through all the people that perhaps maybe you matched with, or maybe that you didn't talk to, that, oh, like maybe this relationship would be better. And then it creates this like level of being superficial. So with that 1 to 2 year process.
And what year was that? Just provide
That
context.
was probably 2021, 2022. I had, at that point, I had been plugged into a church for the first time ever. I had people that I was seeing on a regular basis that were speaking into my life in a meaningful way, that I was processing through information. I had friends growing up, in a wide variety of friend groups, whether that was through school, um, or through sports. But there were very few friendships in my life where I was able to be deep, to have like deep philosophical conversations, to wrestle through a lot of the questions that I had as I came to faith. And in the household that I grew up in, it was just again sort of pushed upon me that like God existed, and there was this person named Jesus that died on a cross for us, but I had no understanding. I had no idea what that looked like. How did that impact me and my own life? Um, to have a relationship with my creator, like I didn't really have any paradigm as to what that looked like. So that 1 to 2 year period, there was a lot of sifting. There was a lot of my worldview changing, my desires changing, my habits starting to change. But there was this disconnect of like taking what is taught in the Bible and the wisdom from the Bible and applying it to the modern era.
Yeah.
And that was just a disconnect. There's no handbook. There's no how-to in the Bible of how to date in the 21st century. There are certainly things to glean as we read through Scripture, but I found that there's a lot of gray area, and I guess I had done a lot of work to reposition myself and to get rid of a lot of unhealthy habits, something that we can get into later that ended up causing a lot of strife in my life was being exposed to pornography at a very young age, being exposed to unwise relationships from a young age, and being exposed to things that I couldn't handle, and just carried a lot of brokenness with me for a long time, without knowing that anything was wrong, just because like that is pretty normal with everyone around us. But that's sort of where I was when I met Adriana, back in the beginning of 2023.
Yeah. And so I won't go into my entire story because I have that a few episodes down, and I'll link it here. But I was in a similar place of like, was reading the Bible, I was going to church, I knew all these things, but I didn't know how to apply it to my life. Because again, like there's no kind of manual for like how to date, how to live in our world today with technology and just like all the things we have access to. Like we really have the world at the tip of our finger. What's the phrase? The tip of our fingers. Really? That's the phrase? Okay. Anyway, is it that? No, it's not that. The tip of our fingers? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, when we met, that was January 2023. The thing that we kind of gravitated towards was, when we started texting, well, first you asked if you could send me a sermon, and that was like, oh, cool. Like, now we're texting a little bit back and forth. But one of the things that seemed kind of like a given to like get to know someone else who's like a Christian is to like do a Bible study together. And, we did this, like, one-on-one, and here I am, like, kind of clueless, thinking, like, "Oh, this guy just, like, wants friends, like, he doesn't really have community, so, like, maybe that's why he wants to hang out with me and, like, do this Bible study." And we met every Friday after the gym. We would, read through this apologetics book, learn how to, like, defend our faith, learned about, like, how the Bible came into existence, what it kind of meant, and I started to develop feelings, just after being around Christopher and just seeing like his humor and his knowledge and just every all these qualities that I saw and that I loved, I started like falling for him, right? But still we were, just being friends and this probably started our Bible study started in like May. And all throughout that time, it was kind of, like, unknown of we never really, like, admitted our feelings. That didn't come till July. But we didn't have, like, long we never hugged. We weren't, like, affectionate. I'm using the word "like" a lot. That's annoying. Go on.
Well, I think that there was an element of, okay, we've been around churched people. We've been around people that I would still deem as wise counsel, and a lot of it was anecdotal, which that I think that's our greatest testimony is that the things that we go through, the good and the bad, we are able to teach others. We are able to see what the Lord does through us when we make poor decisions and perhaps when we make good decisions. And so, again, that was, I think, a way that our culture just made its way in. I had thought that we did things from a very respectful way, not wanting to lead her on.
Which we were good. Like I said, we didn't hug.
Right.
We sat on opposite sides of, like, the room, and that was very good. Like, the moment you told me you liked me, up until that point, there was no leading on at all.
So I just think that, again, the way that our culture can bleed in, it's meeting one on one with someone, like that's very common, in a lot of relationships. There's a level of secrecy. There's a level of I don't have to be accountable to the things that I do or say. And so when even though we weren't doing things that were inappropriate, there was this level of the ways that we had been conditioned to act or proceed in a particular relationship looking back, I think that it probably would have been wiser to
Be around people.
do something in I think, a group setting where people, I mean, again, physical attraction can be blinding. And so when you have other people in your life that genuinely care about you and your best interest, they are able to perhaps perceive things that you may be blinded to. Right. And so whether that's lapses in their character or just immaturities or whatever it may be. And when you date in isolation, you are limiting yourself from what other people can speak into your life. And so, as we'll get into later, and we'll create, I think, a lot of work, at least again, just in our situation, in that I had to do so much explaining, which was firsthand for me, but essentially secondhand for those that I was seeking wise counsel from, is because they weren't witnessing some of the things that I would bring to them seeking, like, I don't know how to deal with this situation, or I don't know if I should bring this up. And everything was based on my perspective versus them hanging out with us in a group setting and being able to witness something firsthand and then bring things up organically.
Yeah. Which I think it's very like in our culture, I feel like it's very common to be like, "Oh, they meet the friends later." Like you vet them first, and then if they're good at like then they meet the friends. Which I really think it should be the opposite. And maybe people do that because they're like, "Oh, I don't wanna get my friends excited, and then I end up breaking up with this guy or, spending time with her," you know? But I feel like it should be the opposite way around. So yeah, sorry, go on where you had left off there.
So I think that we did this Bible study. Again, I thought that it could have been as wholesome in my mind as it could have been. We were studying God and God's Word and how to grow in our faith. And the book was about defending our faith from an apologetics perspective. Um, I wanted to be very respectful for her. I wanted to communicate with her, and I didn't want to lead her on. So I think that with that, we did that well. And then 3 months passed. So this is July 2023.
July 4th, because it was at a July 4th party where you confessed your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I finally, I guess, summoned the courage, which again, this was very, very new to me. I didn't really know what dating should look like. We put so much pressure on it too, I think, as a culture. Um, I think in looking back, there's this sense we place our identity in what other people think of us. And so mustering the courage to do anything, whether it's job related, just anything that's outside our comfort zone, there's this fear of rejection. And so, I mean, regardless of what the situation is, I think that there was this fear of wanting to be accepted and going out on a limb, and then like, what if she shuts me down, type of thing. And so, anyway, I think she received it well. She reciprocated the same feelings. Again, up until that point, we thought that we had been very respectful of each other, and we thought that we were in like a really good place to start a relationship. Through this apologetics course or this book, we had already sort of we dove into some really deep topics, and it actually brought up some similar trauma that each of us experienced in our upbringing, which was, again,
Could be called trauma bonding,
right.
which isn't wise.
Yeah.
It was probably like maybe just a few weeks in, maybe a month into us meeting regularly. So that was kind of, yeah, maybe, what not to do. But when you did confess your feelings for me, like if you were you now, but back then, what would you tell yourself to like look out for before you just kind of slid into that dating?
I think that I place such a large, blanking on the word, just
Emphasis?
yeah, I guess a large emphasis on physical attractiveness as the barometer, and then is this person a Christian? Check yes or check no. As long as that box was checked, like that was sort of the barometer. Like that was as long as those two boxes were checked, like, yeah, I could date this person.
And
so,
define Christian.
literally, do they believe in God, type of thing. Like even at that point, again, fast forward 2 years to where we are now, my understanding of what it looks like to be a disciple versus what our culture may define as being a Christian, I think are two very different things. And so getting into the relationship, I was very much, okay, I'm attracted to you physically, and we've had some spiritual conversations. That's it. And so
Mhm.
there wasn't really much vetting of character,
But we weren't seeing any red flags, so we were like, "Okay, it seems okay to, like, move forward."
or
Yeah.
we weren't able to discern that at the time those things were red
Yeah,
flags.
that's true. Right.
Um,
Yeah. That's a better way of saying it. Um, and so we did this we seemingly did this wisely where he confessed his feelings for me July 4th. We didn't start dating till, like, August
we
10th,
prayed about it. We
maybe.
took
Yeah.
time to,
We
okay,
prayed.
let's seek the Lord. Let's whatever that meant. And
Yeah.
again, like I hadn't. It's not like I had
Yeah.
this rule book of like, okay,
You
you
do
meet a
this,
person,
this.
you date for this amount of time, or you spend time getting to know them, and then like
Mhm.
there wasn't this how to. So again, we thought that what we were doing was the right way to go about it, and
And we did pray about it. Like, I remember praying with my friends, praying with you, about this relationship, and I think the night that we had that really deep conversation. I think it was, like, August 8th or 9th or 10th, something like that, and you asked me, "Do you wanna move forward with this?" And that question I felt like came out of nowhere, but maybe I had brought something up, like, earlier about that, so I was, like, completely confused, and I just kind of said yes, just automatically. I remember writing, like, a pros and cons list, and I was seeing this through a very worldly lens as well. I was like, "Well, if I get in a relationship, like, I'm gonna lose my independence, and am I ready for that? I'm gonna have to." I was also, like, really too productive to where it was becoming toxic, and I was like, "Oh, well, am I gonna have enough time to have, like, this person in my life?" And this is something that affected our relationship later, and so I wrote all these things down, and I'm like, "No," and I was trying to see this through a godly lens. I was like, "But that doesn't matter, like, I can still be independent in a relationship, I don't have to lose myself," and so I was trying to see it through a godly lens, but, like, deep down, I I don't think that I had addressed the issues in my life that affected our relationship coming up. Yeah. So, we get into the relationship.
yeah.
I I remember feeling uneasy about it, like, right when we got in it, but I was like, I think it'll be okay." Is that what you felt as well?
Yeah, and it was difficult to sort of pinpoint.
Because it was like, is this just a fear of something new?
And
You know?
honestly, like from all of my relationships, unfortunately, because I had a, um, I guess, many experiences dating girls for the wrong reasons. And there was always an element of just, can I trust this person? Is this wise? Like when you're living in sin, like you can't have peace. Like it's not possible. And so because that's how all of my relationships had been, I just assumed that that was normal. Um,
Mhm.
and it was very difficult to discern, okay, I have this feeling that is not like peace and joy and contentment. Um,
Yeah.
but it's this like uneasiness. And it was very, very difficult to put sort of my finger on why. But yeah.
Eventually you did, if you wanna go into those reasons. So we dated for a few months, and there were times where we had fun. I went to Colorado to visit his family and meet them. And there were certainly times where it was like, "This is great, like, I love spending time with you, you're, like, turning into my best friend," we were sharing everything with each other, but there was also this element where there was just, like, uneasiness.
It seemed like a lot of
Yeah.
work.
It did seem like a lot of work.
Some of the biggest things that came up in the relationship, um, 1.0, early on, even like right when I confessed my feelings to her, um, she had made a comment at one point that she needed to take time to or be intentional about like cutting off ties with her previous relationship.
Yeah, so this wasn't wise. Like, when I broke up with this person a few years ago, we had or it was maybe 2 years ago at that time, we had said or he had told me, like, "Tell me when you start dating again," which doesn't make sense because if you break up with someone, don't have that conversation continually go on. Like, you don't owe them an explanation. You're not with them anymore. They're not in your life. And so that was not good, and I made that comment thinking that was perfectly normal. Like, I totally thought that was normal, which is crazy looking back. But you learn as you go on. But that brought up issues in you, if you wanna yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that there's like a one size fits all. We've come across a bunch of couples that they have cordial relationships where they did it in a godly way of
Yeah,
perhaps they
maybe.
intentionally like tried to date, but in this particular situation, I think that it was something that was
Mhm.
toxic for both of us.
Right.
And so it illuminated a lot of insecurities in my life, just of previous relationships that I had been in,
Mhm.
of perhaps lingering relationships that led
Yes.
into my relationship, um, my perhaps inability to fully trust people because of their lack of commitment. And so it just seemed this was pressing on a wound that I had experienced. And so perhaps if I didn't have that baggage or that those unresolved wounds in my own life, it may not have been as big of a deal.
Mhm.
But that was sort of a looming thing from the beginning before we even started our relationship of, okay, if this is just one, like that's where, from a spiritual perspective, the enemy peddles in uncertainty.
Yeah.
And when we aren't firmly rooted in our identity in Christ, truly like we are a fish, or yeah, a fish out of water essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where it can be just absolutely awful if our relationship, if our identity isn't rooted in Christ, that we aren't content in who God created us to be and rooted in our purpose and understanding of who God created us to be. Like, life is going to be very difficult, and
Mhm.
he he'll go through a process of pruning that to
Which
get
he
to the
did.
place, right, which we'll get into. But um that was something where like I was super insecure from the get-go, and that was really difficult.
Mhm.
Another thing was like Adriana and I have a age gap, and so with that there's a little
Yeah.
bit of a maturity gap, and that was something where um I think in her position, she didn't have a lot of older women speaking into her life. And that's a two-way street as well, because you have to be receptive. Like, it's
Right.
one thing to, maybe you do have someone in your life that you're
Mhm.
around all the time that sees things in you that you don't see, but are you receptive,
Yeah.
or do you defend yourself?
Mhm.
Do you justify a lot of your actions? And that was something where it's very easy to live in sort of an echo chamber, and we live in such a like an individualistic culture that we're very content, especially from a spiritual perspective, of just showing up to church on Sunday. But like, how many people do you really know, and how many people do really know you?
Mhm.
So that was something that, in getting to know her, we hadn't, for so since we started talking in February or March of 2023, all the way until that point where we started dating, I don't. We had maybe hung out in a group with your friends,
Twice?
maybe, and
Yeah.
so there was just almost this burden of things that I was seeing as potentially unwise,
Mhm.
and I felt burdened in the fact that I was the only one that was bringing it up.
Yeah, I would get defensive and discouraged because I'm younger than him, so there was this like, "Ugh, I'm just, like, not good enough. I wish I was, to his level." You have a lot more knowledge, a lot more experience than me in certain things, and so I felt less than a lot of times, and so that would come out when you would just, like, slightly point out something that I could improve. I would get defensive, and that wouldn't work well because then maybe you would be like, "Oh, well, is she actually doing this thing that I'm questioning?" Or worse, "Can I trust her?" And then your mind started to go to that.
And so with that, I think there's an element of, do you have space in your life for those relationships too?
Mhm.
Something very early on, we were only seeing each other maybe once or twice a week. And
I think it felt like more because we saw each other at the gym.
sure, but like
Yeah.
spending genuine
Yeah.
time where it was intentional of like getting
But
to know
twice a
you,
week.
it was
Yeah.
once or twice a week.
Yeah, and I didn't see a problem with that, like, I remember at one point, he asked to, like, maybe call about once every Monday or something like that, and I had things, like, every single night. I had martial arts, I had, school 'cause yeah, I was at FAU at that time, so I was very busy, and I actually said to him, like, "I I forget exactly what I told you, but I told you that I didn't want to call because I don't want to open myself up too quickly to someone and then fear that, like, it ends quickly or it shuts down. Like, I didn't wanna I don't know what the thing was. It was something like
If
that.
I remember it correctly, it was more like your reasoning was you, and we've talked about this, how both of us were selfish with our time. But you, in the evenings, because I wanted to be very flexible, whether it was in the morning or the evening, like whenever you had time, like I just wanted to like check in and see how your day was. And you viewed your time more as, at night, I want to decompress and do my own thing. I don't want to talk on the phone.
Okay. Yeah. I think there was also an element of like I mentioned, I was scared of losing my independence in a relationship. And so there was also, I think I might have said that to you of like, I don't want to lose myself. And just because I was in a relationship before where like just spent all my time and I kind of lost myself in that. And so I think maybe that's what I said. But I didn't communicate it well. And that was just not good.
So I think the biggest things were lack of accountability, um, absolutely no margin, and that was true for me too. And like, what drew me to Adriana is that we had a lot of similarities. We were into sort of the health and fitness space. We loved listening to the same podcasts.
Your own children.
Back in that time, like we were spending like a couple hours in the gym. Um, my
Mostly talking to each other.
Yeah,
Though.
and I mean, so my both of our priorities have changed a lot since then. But so this is to say, like we had a lot of similarities, but I was just like a little bit further along in my relationship with the Lord at that time. Like I had been going through that maybe 6 months prior, where I was sort of releasing a lot of these things, and I wasn't placing such an emphasis on like the worldlier things. And it could be personality too, and like stage of life. I mean, you were in school, which is like something like you go through different seasons of life, and so your relationship with the Lord, and I know that you've probably talked about spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices. That's going to look different in each season. So that's not to say that that's like a one size fits all for every single disciple. But in the time that I was in, again, like for the first 2 years that I had moved out here, didn't have many friends down here. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. And so with that, there was perhaps a much greater amount of time than most people would be able to spend of coming home from work and just listening to sermons for a couple hours at a time. And so there was, it was not linear. It was a lot of information that I was consuming. And that's sort of an aside. Without like I was consuming so much information without a practical outlet of, okay, how do I use all this information?
There was another thing was like, I don't know if you mentioned this, maybe I missed it, but you didn't have like a healthy way to process the feelings that you were experiencing when like there were times where I would say things about my past like nonchalantly, just like casually put it out there. And because you had experiences with other relationships where there was trust issues and cheating, that put you on guard. And so anything I said, you looked at it through that lens. Um and you had friends but not if you wanna go more into that, like, you didn't have those people that you could really be vulnerable with, or you didn't open yourself up to that.
So I got plugged into a cool community where, again, not knowing anyone, this group of guys just sort of really took me in, which was awesome at the church that I had been going to. And they were between the ages of 22 and 35. And so it was sort of that like, we were all in the same sort of season of life. I had friends and I was able to have deep conversations with them openly.
Which was better than what I had, and I had friends too, but I wasn't telling them everything. Like, you have to be vulnerable in your relationships. You can have all the friends that mean well and wanna help you, but if you don't share the things that you're struggling with, they're not gonna be able to do anything.
Right. And so I had the infrastructure in place. I had the friendships available to me that were willing to pour into me. But again, I didn't know I didn't have an understanding of the importance of confession and praying for each other, um, opening opening myself up to them in a greater degree, which that came to light most when we ended up breaking up. Is that I had realized that it was exhausting for me to communicate all of the feelings and all of the things that I had been essentially bottling up for the prior 3 months, and communicating that to each person in this friend group. Um, and so that realized that though I had friends, I had not been intentional enough to open myself up to communicate vulnerably so that we could process these things together.
Yeah. And I thought I kind of had like accountability in the way I went to a therapist, but it's a very professional relationship. So they're not seeing your everyday life and they're only hearing what you tell them, right? So the day that you actually broke up with me, I went to my therapist and I was considering breaking up with you, but I was not bold enough to do it. Did I tell you that ever? Wow. So yeah, probably just like by the time, you broke up with me, I wasn't gonna say anything. But that day, it was a Friday, I remember, and I went to my therapist and I was just talking about these things and I was like, I feel like we're gonna break up. Like, I don't know if I should break up with him. But for me, I was overwhelmed because I constantly felt less than. Because you would bring things up that like, oh, you had a tone with this person and then I would get defensive, like I mentioned earlier. And so I was having that sort of feelings. And I also you wear your emotions on your sleeve, but like not in the way that you'll express them, just in the way like your whole body language just changes. And so I always sensed like something was wrong with you. And so I would constantly be like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And you wouldn't tell me all the time because maybe it wasn't the right place. We were about to leave or you were just bottling it up. And so I felt this uneasiness of like, I'm doing something wrong, I'm doing something wrong, what am I doing wrong, I don't get it, and just like going in circles. And so that's what I was talking to my therapist about. And the way I saw it was like, I'll mention things about my past and he like totally shuts down, like I don't get it. And I was just going in circles with that. That's how I felt, but really you were being triggered because the random things that I would say would take you back to the wounds that you had experienced. And so anyway, the day that you broke up with me, I was already thinking about that. But after I left that session with my therapist, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give it some time. We'll see what happens. And then bam, break up with me. And I was frankly, you would think that I would have handled it better considering that I went to my therapist, like I talked about breaking up, but I did not handle it well. I stared at the wall for hours. I was crying. I was so upset. I was like, "Well, can't we fix this? Can we stay together?" Like I was really fighting for it. And I don't know what was going through your mind during that time.
So I think leading up to the breakup, it was just, and again, it was so difficult to discern in the season, but something that I kept reflecting on was that love, joy, and peace are part of the fruit of the spirit. And I was I had so much anxiety, and there was almost this sense of dread, just because a lot of the things that you had talked about that were brought up. I started to associate my brokenness and my wounds. I started to associate them with you because that pain hadn't been dealt with. You bringing certain things up was causing pain, and then I started to like place that on you.
Right.
And so there was just
When really it was like you were carrying this baggage and I just had these little like needles that I was slightly poking. Yeah.
this
Unintentionally.
level of uneasiness,
Yeah.
all the time, like just going over to hang out, do the simplest things. There's just this level of uneasiness, and it just reached a breaking point. I didn't have this like blatant no, you shouldn't date her. It was just I lacked peace and something was wrong, and I needed to like it was unbearable.
Something needs to change. Yeah.
Something needed to change, and so I made that decision to um, break up. It was super difficult.
Yeah.
And go on.
I was just gonna say, like at that point, again, just with the paradigm that I was seeing things through, as far as I was concerned, like again, she was a Christian, and I was attracted to her, and so like we should be able to figure this thing out. And obviously, like that's oversimplifying it.
Yeah.
But there was this like back and forth of again where the enemy peddles in the uncertainty of like, oh, am I ever going to meet someone else like her? Or am I going to what if I'm making a mistake? And again, me not being so immature in my relationship with Lord, of how do I discern, like, what if this isn't God's will? And like all of these different things that I was so uneasy. I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to change something. I had the belief that if God wanted us together, that He would bring it about again. And I needed to take time to figure out whatever was going on. Again, like in the moment, I hadn't discerned that, oh, like she's bringing up wounds from my past and I need to address those wounds.
Right.
Honestly, I was blinded by the pain that I was experiencing and this level of just anxiety. And so I decided to break things up.
It was just like, you see me, you have pain, she's causing my pain, which was true in a sense, but there was something deeper of like, you have to work through this. So we broke up, it was on a Friday, and then there wasn't really closure. I was just so emotional that like it wouldn't, nothing was taken really from that. And so I think you said, let's meet on Tuesday, or was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And just talk about things. And we were still broken up, but I had this like, I was just hoping that like there'd be a major sign when we would be sitting on that bench talking on Tuesday that would say, "Get back together," like big writing in the sky. Like, I was praying for that. And when we met on Tuesday, none of that happened. We both were very upset, but I did have peace about breaking up at that point. I think it was good what we did from there. You had told me, like, I think it's wise if we don't have each other's location. I don't think we should be in contact and text, which I had never experienced before. I had always experienced the, kind of hanging on a little bit, and which is not good. I really think that like no contact is very wise. We could go more into that later. But at that point, what did you experience in the breakup? Any like revelations or just something that changed you inside? Did you feel less uneasy? Did you feel more peace? Yeah, just kind of like explain what you were feeling. So that was part one of our story. And unfortunately, you are going to have to wait another week to hear part two because this was a 3 hour podcast. And guys, I had to split it up. If you want to hear all the other details about the past year and a half, come back next Friday and it will be out.